A kind day to you all. I'm Kinsmark.
I'm Violeta.
And we've just come from Distant Worlds, music from Final Fantasy, conducted at the capable hands of Arnie Roth and the Houston Symphony Chorus and Orchestra. There we are.
Yes, indeed.
And figured we'd share our account of the experience. For those who aren't familiar with it, it's a almost decade-running series of orchestral productions that Square Enix sponsor and are conducted all around the world.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Arnie Roth, the conductor of this particular performance, has headed it for, I think he said 9 years.
I think he's been doing it since its very inception, prior to it ever being called Distant
then it was
Worlds.
Like Dear Friends and More Friends and things like
so
that.
On. But the Distant Worlds version has been going for 9 years.
Yeah. And they're about to come up on their, of course, 10-year anniversary of the Distant Worlds production series and the 30-year anniversary of the Final Fantasy franchise as a whole.
Which means next year, this one, they're doing something special. We don't know what. He hinted that special things were coming, but he could not tell us what.
Yeah, so I could kind of infer that Mr. Roth is apparently somewhat close with Nobuo Uematsu, for those who aren't aware, the iconic composer of a lot of the Final Fantasy franchise's music. And the entire show is set to an entire in full view choir and orchestra set with a screen
with a video with the various games that the music is coming from.
Yeah, footage of the games that the scores come from.
Yeah.
And it just made for an incredible multimedia presentation. So to kind of familiarize you guys with the tracks that they perform, they tend to choose tracks that are some of the most musically impressive and that conjure up some of the most emotion. So it isn't always the most fan-loved or necessarily the most iconic tracks.
No,
they are some of the most impactful to experience in person, however.
Yeah. There is nothing quite like being surrounded by that sound of an orchestra and choir belting it out. There's just nothing like it. Headphones don't hold a candle to the way it sounds in person.
Yeah, coming from one who was in an orchestra for several years and played Carnegie Hall.
He and my parents never forget that.
I think I'm more proud of that than you are.
Yes, you are. I mean, I'm proud that I played in Carnegie Hall.
Awesome.
I was part of an orchestra that was the best in the state in high school. Yeah. But...
And also, I should clarify prior to moving on, please do not mistake my lack of energy for a dearth of entertainment and excitement. I'm just feeling very low-key today, so keep that in mind.
Sleep schedules have been a bit wonky, you know.
So to familiarize you guys with the program of tracks that we heard, they started with the Final Fantasy Prelude, then went to, from Final Fantasy XIV, Torn from the Heavens, and as Arnie Roth said, he likes to start every show with the Final Fantasy Victory theme.
That he in his words, there's there's a very specific way. You can't
the proper way to start a Distant Worlds performance.
And I have to admit, I get happy giggles every time I hear that Victory theme. It may or may not be the sound for my text messages.
I hear that chime all the time.
He does.
So from there, they then covered from Final Fantasy IV, Battle with the Four Fiends, and then one of my favorites that they performed was from Final Fantasy VIII, the Balam Garden theme.
Which had an interesting story behind it, because apparently Mr. Roth has been asking about this for years now, but they've only recently started doing it because they lost the score.
Square Enix couldn't
find the original score. So Arnie said, you know what, that's fine. We'll just transcribe it from the actual music
the
of the game. And so they did. So they managed to essentially rewrite.
Yeah, they just reverse engineered that track.
And so I think for the past 2 years they've been able to play it, but they hadn't been before that.
Yeah, that performance was phenomenal.
I couldn't quite remember which song that was, but when they started playing, I'm like, yes. Yeah. That to me is Final Fantasy VIII right there.
Yeah, it's essentially like the feel of sort of the positive aspect of that story, just sort of personified in an audio track.
All put in one, you know.
So after that came from Final Fantasy VI, a character theme medley of each of the major characters from 6.
I actually really enjoyed that. I know nothing about 6, but I found out that I like 5 and 6's music a lot.
6 is the one with Kefka.
Yes.
So.
I recognized him. I was like, oh wait, I know that.
It was interesting to see on the screen, because like I said, they have the video coming from the games.
It's like the old
the
in
classic
Japanese
games,
like all the stuff was in
Japanese versions,
and it was great. Like,
and they also cut in every now and again, contrasting the pixel art style of the classic iterations of those games. They would also cut in the
Dissidia.
Yeah, the Dissidia, and then the cutscenes from some of the remastered versions of some of the classic games that have very impressive looking cutscenes. So it was interesting to see those contrasting images of the same characters.
I really enjoyed it though, because you kind of got a better feel for what those characters were supposed to look like.
Absolutely.
And I think that's kind of a easier way to kind of understand why is this theme the way it is, because you can actually see the character it's supposed to be based on the screen and not just in little 8-bit characters.
Certainly the action scenes are a little more impressive in Square Enix CG cutscene quality of today as compared to the explosion effect of classic games.
I thought it was adorable.
So,
I'll be honest, I kind of thought it was adorable.
Following that came from one of my favorites, from Final Fantasy VII, the Genova Complete score, which isn't necessarily the Genova track that most people are familiar with. It's not the one that it's another one of those that is generally used in the game during dialogue scenes to do with the darker aspects of that story, especially as characters are like coming under the control of Genova and stuff.
And then sometimes it shows up in certain fight scenes. It's not always on, and a lot of the time, the songs that people recognize as the Genova theme are not actually the same ones. They're not carried throughout the game.
Yeah, exactly.
And you guys will see that someday.
Oh yeah. Yeah, because at some point we're planning on playing through the entire Final Fantasy franchise on the channel. That's a long time in coming and an incredibly huge commitment to finally set in motion. So you can look forward to it. Just don't expect it anytime soon.
But not soon.
It's on the planning stage.
I've already claimed FF10 for my own. I have already said he will play the Blitzball.
I'll play the spurts.
But
I love that.
The rest of it is mine.
So let's see. Although somewhere in there, I could have sworn that. Oh, that's coming later. All right. So.
Okay. Sorry, we're getting ahead of ourselves.
After that, then came from Final Fantasy XIII, one of the few games in the franchise I have not completed, just because personal taste critique I'll save for another day. I didn't enjoy 13 as much, so I never finished that game. So a lot of the coverage of
I didn't even play any of it. I saw a little bit of the gameplay, and I'll be honest, my main reason for not playing it is none of the characters really clicked with me.
Yeah, well, like I said, I'll save that for another day. So,
but the music,
suffice it to say, the music from 13, I found interesting because a lot of it, since I'd never gotten very far in that game, I had never heard.
Yeah, I actually found that
I liked the music and the art style a lot more than I liked the writing.
We got to see a lot of the in-world, the big panoramics
the cutscenes
of 13. I thought the world was really cool looking, and that's a part of the game that neither of us really got to see. So we didn't get to see the way the world itself
I actually saw more of 13's key character, Lightning, via Final Fantasy Dissidia than I did from the actual game itself, because I absolutely adore Dissidia and then Duodecim.
You can expect that also if we can figure out how to make it work.
One of my favorite Final Fantasy games, and it isn't even a numbered entry in the series. It's sort of
But I love the story, which is weird. It is Final Fantasy, the fighting game.
And
that's what it is.
It made some more interesting characterizations, let me finish that word, than the component games that some of these characters came from did. For instance, Vaughn in 12. One of the just most dull main characters in the franchise's
but
history
he
was made
in
awesome in Dissidia.
It was like he started out kind of the way we remember him from the game.
And then he evolved into something so much more.
It was so cool.
So anyway, I'll save that for discussion of the actual game.
That was actually where I heard a lot more of the themes prior to today.
Yeah,
in Dissidia.
I realized I had heard some of the music from 13 in Dissidia and didn't know that's where it came from. I didn't know what
it was because a lot of the places you play in Dissidia, they all have themes from the various characters' games. So I was very excited when we were going, watching today, to hear some of those that I'm like, wait, I recognize that. Now I finally know what it is,
like
where it came from.
Characters to tracks and stuff like that.
Blinded by Light, I actually did enjoy. That was from 13. I did actually like that one. And the visuals of that game are pretty cool too.
Yeah. So after that one then came from Final Fantasy IX, Festival of the Hunt. And 9 is one that I know a lot of people are incredibly fond of. Like one of our co-founders for Last Level Prize, Atticus. It's his favorite entry in the franchise. He and I have debated the merits of multiple entries in the series on many occasions. It's just one that, again, not to critique it at all, it's just as far as my personal tastes are concerned, it isn't my favorite.
But I have to admit,
hearing its tracks performed in person, though,
make it better. And then watching some of the, because of course they did a lot of the cutscene stuff. Watching some of the, not necessarily battle scenes, but major plot stuff is happening.
The cutscenes about major plot events.
Yeah, that was really cool looking. I actually kind of liked the art style of the spaces better than the rest of it.
Yeah, I think my favorite aspect of the art design for 9 had to do with its cityscapes.
Yes, I love the cityscapes.
They look
That was
awesome.
one of my favorites. Yes.
It actually reminded me of a much lesser known RPG, The Legend of Dragoon, because some of its cities are incredible to look at as well. Of course, that was I think that was actually Sony.
That was Sony. Yeah,
it wasn't actually
Sony.
Square Enix, even though it's very comparable to Square Enix's games.
Yeah.
So anyway, after that, then came the last entry prior to the intermission, the Chocobo Medley.
I kind of want to go get Joy. Joy, my Chocobo.
I mean, it's right over there. And she acquired it at her first anime convention.
This is Joy, my Chocobo.
And she named it. Because of course she did.
Look at it! It's so she's so cute.
Can comments clarify? I think that's actually the art style of the Chocobos from the spin-off, Chocobo-centric games. I think there was a Chocobo's Mansion. I don't know. I never played any of them. I just know there were spin-off games about a central Chocobo character, and that looks familiar as, the art style of that.
Wait, I got it.
I'm like the Fro guy from 13.
It didn't work, though.
Yeah, that reminds me, my favorite part of their medley, because they took a few liberties with it.
They did take a few liberties with the
to have some creative fun. Adding for the choir, at points of emphasis, just, for them. And to cue it in the video with the little Chocobo, peeping out of, I don't know his name from 13, his Fro, and just beep! And just cueing those together, it was just
great.
Adorable. I loved it.
It was hilarious. But yes,
and that was cut with a lot of the highlighted scenes of Chocobo rearing and racing and traveling around the world and such.
Chocobo catching
from
too.
All the different games,
including some of the Chocobo summons.
Yeah.
Though they didn't use my favorite, which made me sad, because I love the 7 Chocobo summon with the crazy...
Yeah, they did show one of the 7 Chocobo summons. It wasn't the usual just, crash into the enemy.
But I like that one.
Chocomog, I think, is the name of that summon. So anyway, after that came the intermission. And as far as anyone seeing this at the Houston Symphony Orchestra center is concerned, I simply say, man... Whew, if you have issues with your knees, trying to head to the facilities to relieve oneself, that's actually fairly strenuous because there are a lot of stairs involved.
The elevator.
Yeah.
They do have elevators, but they are manned, so you have to ask to use them. I'm pretty sure if you explain that you have a problem with your knee or your leg, they'll probably let you in. But...
And the symphony center itself, I'm not sure if the actual structure has a name. It's a very nice place. And
you mean Jones Hall?
Is that the name of it?
Yeah,
Jones Hall?
that's Jones Hall.
Okay. They have a cafe in the upper portion of it. From what we could smell, because we didn't have any, since we ate prior to attending.
It smelled really good,
It smelled very
actually.
good, and I didn't hear anyone complaining about the food, so I assume the food is good.
They also had a bar, so you could order cocktails.
Yeah, and one could order ahead from the the food and from the counter, so that during the intermission, it would already show up waiting for you.
Like it would be ready for you.
Yeah,
at intermission,
so that
which was really
cool.
So
anyway, after intermission, then they moved on to some of my favorite tracks in the entire performance.
Yes.
First after that was from Final Fantasy X, the Hymn of the Faith / the Sending Suite. And that was absolutely fantastic. One of the highlights of the event for me, at least.
And Mr. Roth also specified that they don't get to play that one everywhere
because it necessitates
because it requires a choir
and an incredibly talented one.
And so
and that is one of my only critiques about the entire thing. Is that, of course, for the Hymn of the Faith, you have like the soloist sections, and the male soloist, I can't say I was entirely impressed with, because he overemphasized his consonants in particular. And it felt more like he was reading from the sheet than necessarily just performing.
To be fair, he might actually have been a stand-in.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I'm just saying. As far as like for my stance in the audience, the female soloist, however,
she sounds exactly like the one from the game.
Absolutely perfect.
Beautiful.
I could not possibly have felt more impressed with her performance.
I was just like sitting there. My eyes got so huge the moment the first sound left her throat. I was just like, it's amazing. Don't ever stop.
I don't often get chills from musical performances. She gave them to me. I was incredibly impressed.
It was great.
So anyway, after that, then came from Final Fantasy V, the Clash on the Big Bridge,
which I actually really enjoyed.
Yeah, it's very good. I've actually had it pop up on my Fantasy Music Pandora station on multiple occasions.
I really liked it. Like, I mean, I've never played 5, but I really enjoyed that. The music from it.
And one of my favorite renditions of it is the somewhat more like electronica and rock cover of it from the Black Mages.
The Black Mages do a lot of cool stuff.
So good. That's another group entirely that, if y'all are fans of Final Fantasy soundtrack tracks, check them out if you haven't heard of them already. They
Blackwater.
Fantastic, yes.
Blackwater.
And their cover of Genova is also awesome. So anyway,
beautiful.
After that, then came another one of my absolute top 3 highlights of the entire event from Final Fantasy VII, Cosmo Canyon.
And another story with this particular one is that this one was played because the fans requested it so often, and there were so many that this was the first year that they have played it. And I can tell you that this is Kin's favorite track.
Yep. From all of Final Fantasy VII. Yeah,
from the whole game. And it was good. It was perfect.
It was so phenomenal. Because that's a track that, for those who aren't familiar with it, harkens to sort of a Native American aesthetic, and it isn't overdone, nor was it performed in an overemphasized manner here. It has very few instruments actually involved, so it's very simplistic and minimalistic. However, at the same time, it slowly adds layers as it progresses. It culminates into an incredibly subtle and yet powerful track. I absolutely adore it, and their performance, having added instruments to it, because they have an entire orchestra there, they may as well use them.
I really loved their rendition of it. I thought they did a phenomenal job on it. It was
fantastic.
It was so great. Like, that's another one that actually did give me chills. Sitting there when that flute first started up, I'm like, I just knew that moment. I'm like, oh, this is gonna be amazing. Like, I didn't have to hear the rest of it to know this is awesome.
So after that, then came from Final Fantasy IX, the Roses of May. Another one that...
It was kind of a quieter song, but it was really pretty. Like, it was, it did kind of have a gentle-ish melody. Like, There was happy, but a little bit of bittersweet mixed in there, I thought.
The interesting thing for me, though, is I've only ever played 9 to completion one time, because I was curious and I wanted to actually finish it. And that was a track that, for some reason, I don't get the feeling, because it felt familiar to me. I couldn't necessarily say that I immediately knew what it was.
Right.
It just, the first time hadn't left much of an impression on me. The Houston Symphony Orchestra's performance of it, however, absolutely did. I enjoyed it far more in their performance than I necessarily did in the game itself.
Yeah, and that was something that I found very interesting about going to this concert in general, was the way it made you look at the music differently, particularly for the older games where they couldn't have the full orchestral sound.
When it was just MIDI files.
Yeah, when all they could do was MIDI files. But hearing them turned into, the full orchestra.
It's sort of hearing what Nobuo Uematsu was hearing in his head as he composed them, and then had to simplify them for
the MIDIs.
The 32-bit systems of the time. It's the real versions of it.
Yeah, this is like, if those games were to be made right now, this is what they would sound like.
Yeah.
And
of
my
course,
goodness.
A lot of those tracks have received remasters for, the remakes and remasters of the games and stuff. Again, just to hear it live is an incredible comparison to the classics.
If there's music that you love, no matter what it is, if you ever get the chance to go to a live concert with it and it's not going to break your bank, do it. Mm-hmm. Just do it, because it doesn't matter how good a quality your recording is. It doesn't matter what format the recording is in. It will never compare to what it's like in person.
Yeah, especially when it's played at the hands of people who care about the performance.
Yes.
Because there's just a certain sense of soul that's added to the sound as it's performed live.
And if you know what you're looking for and you watch the people who are playing, you can see them put their entire bodies into it.
When they just completely invest in it.
Yeah. When they're just so into it, their entire bodies flow with the music itself. It's amazing.
Yeah.
What came after that?
The next track was actually one that I was surprised to see included here, because it comes from a game that's pretty underappreciated in the Final Fantasy series. However, it's one that I absolutely adore the aesthetic of.
I love the aesthetic and the sound.
The art style, I like the audio direction, I like the dialogue writing. It's just one of the games in the series that I criticize the overarching story.
I feel like it was one of the weaker ones.
And
like there wasn't a central...
Yeah, it was a confused game, and that is Final Fantasy XII. The track they played, the Dalmasca Ester Sand, one of the overworld themes as one is exploring outside the city of Dalmasca, which is sort of the hub of that game.
I'm not gonna lie, it is my favorite.
It's a fantastic track. I love it.
Of that whole game, and I liked that soundtrack so much when we had the chance to buy the full soundtrack, complete with the little booklet. Collection. I did. I bought it. This is my favorite overworld theme from that entire game. And the way their rendition of it was just so powerful. Awesome. And it just sort of it was like the music just sort of just surrounded you. And paired with the visuals of some of the overworld, the cityscapes, the airships, all of it was just yes. It's it made me actually want to give 12 a try again.
Because 12 is another that I haven't actually completed. I've come incredibly close.
There were some close ones, but
it's just one that, as much as I appreciate its art style, its character writing, and its audio direction, I could never get into its main actual overarching story enough to fully complete it. I feel as though I should, especially because I absolutely love its combat system.
And I love the world.
Yeah.
The world of it is
It's actually set in the same world as Final Fantasy Tactics. No, it's not 11.
Tactics.
Because it's not.
I've never played Tactics.
It's not Vana'diel. Vana'diel is 11.
Vana'diel is 11.
It's Ivalice. I absolutely didn't just search for that so that I could sound like I know what I'm talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And it's a world that's actually shared, one of the few, across multiple games in the series.
Yeah. I have to admit something. This might be heresy, but the FF12 Chocobo theme is my favorite rendition.
It's very good.
Of the Chocobo theme. And that feels like heresy because my favorite Final Fantasies are 10 and 7.
I think if I were to pin down my favorite Chocobo theme in particular, I'd actually say 10.
I love 10s. I do love...
It's so good. It's so,
it's
chipper.
bouncy.
Yeah.
It's so cute.
It's energetic. It's happy about itself.
But yeah,
and I like that about
it's between... For me, it's between 12 and 10.
Yeah.
I think those are my favorites. So I have to admit, I love the Chocobo races from 7. It's just great.
So then moving on, the next track they performed was, again from Final Fantasy X, To Xanarkand. One of the most emotionally moving tracks, I think, in the entire franchise's history. Like, I still get choked up
I get a
hearing
little choked up.
And especially hearing the emotional performance, from a live orchestra. I could feel that, tightening in my throat even then.
And it did not help that the scene that they showed with the music was the one from 10 where Yuna is essentially performing their version of a funeral. And you have people falling to the ground weeping because they're their lost loved ones.
Yeah.
And it's just like, thank you for ripping out my heart and just crushing it.
Yeah, it's...
But it was beautiful. The orchestra and the choir... spot on that one.
Yeah, the choir especially. Oh man. They absolutely nailed it.
It was beautiful. I have no other... There's nothing else for me to say. It was beautiful.
As close to perfect performance of that song as it could get.
Yes.
So after that, nearing the end, came from all of the Final Fantasies 1 through 14, the 25th Anniversary Battle Medley.
That was
a composite of all of the fan-requested versions of the combat themes from every game. So some of these were from major encounters against specific characters, or boss fights. Some of them were boss battles.
Some of them were just general.
Just the field combat sounds.
But wow, it was good. I have to admit, my absolute favorite rendition of the battle themes from that particular one was actually FF10.
Yeah.
There was something seriously cool about their rendition of FF10.
They didn't linger very long on 7. I was a little disappointed there, just because I like that game.
I know, we like that game.
And a funny little note from conductor Ani Roth, as he was saying, when they first composed and then recorded for a CD,
it was for a
this
CD.
medley, he thought immediately, we will never perform this live. Because it's just too complex, it's got too many moving parts, too many complex transitions.
Nobody's gonna, it's just never gonna happen.
And
it's
and as
totally
he said,
happening.
well, a couple of years later, here we are.
Here we are, performing it live in Houston. And I was just like, yes.
Yeah, and apparently this was the third time, I think he said, that they've come to Houston. So anyway, after that, as their closing song, they performed the Final Fantasy main theme.
Complete with credit roll.
Yeah.
The one that you hear at the end of the games when you win. And they had the credit roll. And we were just like...
For that particular one, the harpist did a fantastic job. Because the first instrument you hear in the Final Fantasy main theme for the entire franchise, and usually the closing instrument that one hears, is the harp. The do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do.
Yep.
That is a crucial instrument in the performance of that track.
And the harpist was spot on.
Perfect.
She was great.
Yeah, fantastic.
And we all went, the whole group, the entire filled up concert hall went insane.
I think within the last few tracks they performed, there were a total of 3 standing ovations.
They deserved it.
Upon closing, after Conductor Roth had
left the room.
I was saying, Roth. For some reason, I thought it was Ross for a second. I was like,
no,
confusion,
Roth.
Get the name right. After he had left, he came out a few seconds later and it was just like, hang on, we have an encore, and you can even help us out. All you need to know is one word. Can you guys guess what it was? If you're fans of Final Fantasy, you should know what it is. One word!
I was hoping. I was so hoping. Because I was very sad when I first read the thing of the one song. I was like, I can't believe they're doing a Final Fantasy concert and this song isn't in it. And it was even mentioned in his comments earlier on. And I'm like, One word.
The song they kept in reserve for their encore.
You only needed one word.
One-Winged Angel.
Because all you needed to know was Sephiroth. And then the entire crowd went wild again, because we all just...
Yeah, it was...
flipped our lids.
So awesome.
And
you could tell they
there
had
was
fun
some backlighting the whole concert.
Yeah, suddenly
it was
they
blue
shifted the entire stage to
into
red lighting.
And then they showed this awesome compilation of Sephiroth.
Yeah, it was a lot of footage drawn from Advent Children.
Advent Children. They had some
there.
from the actual game.
Yeah.
Like the very intro, the first thing we got to see in the intro was his iconic fire scene from FF7, the game. And the last thing we saw at the final crescendo was the fire scene from Advent Children.
Turning away into the fire.
So I was sitting there, I was like freaking out when he said, "You just need to know one word."
Oh yeah! As soon as he said that, I knew exactly what it was. I was just like,
"Yes!" Like he didn't even have to announce the song to me. I already knew.
And the thing is, like, an orchestral crowd is usually a very calm and respectful and reserved sort of group, and yet the crowd went wild, as
literally.
They say.
Like he says the name Sephiroth. It's One-Winged Angel.
And people are screaming.
You guys
and
even
out
know
of their
when
seats.
to say it, don't you?
Oh yeah.
And we were all like, yes. And I feel bad for the the people who were there because their loved ones were into it, and they have no idea what's going on. They're like, what in the world is this? Like my poor parents.
Yeah. Yeah, because they were the ones that took us.
But it was great.
To do that
I didn't sing along. I don't know what you're talking about. There was no singing along going there.
It made for an incredibly entertaining and satisfying experience.
It was fantastic. If you guys are fans of the Final Fantasy franchise, if you're just fans of the music,
check it out. Check their
if you get the chance,
their touring circuit, because it isn't just performed in Houston. They perform all across the world.
It's international. It truly is international.
Yeah. So I think if I understand the way they do it correctly,
I think they take separate years.
Well, they tour in different places in different years, and I think it's that Arnie Roth coordinates with multiple orchestras in the cities they're performing in.
I honestly think he's the one who's almost always conducting.
I think so, yeah, if I understood it correctly.
He travels to the places, works with the orchestras, and then he's the one who's always conducting.
And it sounds like he coordinates with Uematsu so that...
he's going between, the orchestras, Uematsu, Square Enix themselves, to get the songs that people really want to hear. That
fans want to hear, that Square Enix wants to showcase. That way
things that even
is
he
happy.
Just wants to showcase. Because he had a few... He's like, this was my pick. Yeah. This was Nobuo Uematsu's pick.
Yeah. One of the only critiques, and it's incredibly mild, don't mistake me.
It was very minor. Very
of the entire experience was simply that the video aspect of the performance wasn't always as impactful as I think it could have ended up if the footage shown for each song were chosen a little more carefully such that it were actually relevant to the song performed at the time. A lot of it just seemed like it was
just stuff from it was highlights from the game.
Yeah, it was just a cut up highlight reel of interesting scenes from the game that wasn't always relevant to the song they were performing.
And they did do some recycling of stuff.
Certain scenes were cycled in multiple times.
And I'm going to be honest, all Final Fantasy games are long enough that you don't need to be recycling scenes.
Exactly. So it just kind of seemed
the
thrown
editing
together.
Could have been a bit stronger.
There were some gaps in some places where it was just a dark screen.
I think there was some rendering issues also.
Yeah.
Because there were some things where, like, I've seen where it came from.
Yeah.
And I know it's not actually that choppy.
Yeah, and it just faded out a little.
I was like, that has to be a render error.
Yeah.
Now, that's not to say it wasn't good, because it still was.
No.
And it was still enjoyable, and I
at the
still
same time,
liked
though,
it.
as thrown together as the choices of the cutscenes that they used for a lot of these, many of which were actually drawn from Dissidia, which I found interesting.
I think that's because that was one of the places you could get like high res,
the HD versions of some of the characters of classic games.
Yeah,
it was still well cued and timed to the music.
Yes, it was.
So I was just like, a strangely contrasting amount of effort and care went into the editing of this, because it seems like the footage chosen is a little haphazard. The timing thereof is just magnifique to fit to the timing of the performance.
Like, I don't know what happened
sort of
there, but...
give and take here.
But I still enjoyed it. I still liked, like, a lot of the stuff is... I got to see parts of the games that I've never played, that I never got to see. And I found out that I actually like the look of a lot of the games that I've never known anything about. Simply because we got to see some of the footage via the big screen. And I have to admit, I was actually really pleased because in between the songs, they would have their Distant Worlds symbol. Yeah. Their logo. And it had like this kind of blue and purple, pretty...
the crystal.
Like going behind it. But at the very end, when they did the encore, instead of the blue, it was fire. There was fire in it. And I was just like, yay. But it was a nice big screen. I feel like it was actually...
as our group commented on, we don't think there's like a poor seat acoustically in the house.
No.
The entire place sounded amazing acoustically.
And I feel like the screen was big enough. You could pretty much see it from anywhere.
Even in the upper level.
Yeah, and I think that that's a big thing because if you're going to something that has a multitude of different things, like, you have the audio, obviously.
It's a multimedia presentation.
But, with the visuals, you kind of have to make sure that people can enjoy the visuals. Like, if they're paying to come see this and they're paying good money to come see it, they need to be able to actually, see it.
Absolutely.
I feel like the presentation at that point was spot on.
Yeah.
And I actually really liked the intro that they did during the prelude, which was actually showing... It was like what Final Fantasy is what it said across the screen, and then they showed you
clips from each game up until 14.
And then it says, and what it will always be.
And then he mentioned that Roth had actually asked
if they could
permission
do
to perform stuff from 15. And Square Enix was like, no, you have to wait for the release. So for future Distant Worlds performances...
There will be stuff from 15.
One can imagine 15 will get added to the list.
Well, 15 is a big enough deal that he knows the exact day
it's
going to be released. And they actually put it on the brochure.
Yeah.
On our little thing that tells us.
The program, as it were.
The program. They tell us when it's coming out, some of the cool stuff from it. And I'm like...
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is part of the marketing thing for the franchise in general.
But, like, I thought it was hilarious that he knew the exact day. He's like, and how many of you guys are excited for the September release? And we're all like, me.
Oh yeah, so
hi.
So you can tell that
he clearly cares.
Yeah,
and
the
that
conductor
came
himself.
Through.
Oh yeah, he's not just a conductor that's just handed a set of music.
He's not phoning it in.
He's just feigning, excitement for a franchise he knows nothing about. He clearly knows and appreciates the Final Fantasy series, and that comes through in his conduction.
It's clear that he's actually gone through the many pieces they've played. He's actually been very picky about it. It's like, this piece, I really wanted to play this specific one. Like, things like that, talking about how this was a piece that Nobuo Uematsu really wanted to have performed. Things like that. Like, and he kept referring to him with first name. Yeah. And he kept having to, like, he tried to, like...
finish the name for a more formal mention.
he only did that. He only managed that half the time.
You can tell they're on a very positive rapport with each other, and that's really cool to see.
But it was great. If you guys get the chance to see it, I highly recommend it.
Absolutely.
If you just like video game music in general, you'll probably enjoy this. Like, you don't even need to know Final Fantasy to get into this music.
Because the music from Final Fantasy is honestly one of the highlights of the franchise itself.
Yes.
It has had,
beautiful,
for almost 30 years now, one of the most solid series of soundtracks of any game franchise in history.
Yes. And it's actually been considered one of the franchises that had propelled the idea that video game music could be serious music, could be good, could be, award winning.
Yeah, like
they really pioneered that in some ways.
I point to that series in I've had conversations and debates in the past about whether games merit the title art.
And honestly,
and
yes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
They don't always.
They don't all
However,
make it, but
they can. Just like any medium can. Especially when the component parts involved in the creation of a game,
they just come
from
together.
its audio to its art to its acting performances to its writing, all in individual components easily considered classical arts themselves, to then find a way to just weave all of them together into a cohesive whole. How is that not high art?
It is. Like, as far as I'm concerned, it truly and honestly is. Because it can take
so much more finesse to make all of those things that are already impressive individually then complement each other in a way that is cohesive and makes sense and all comes together into a whole that is more than its component pieces.
Mm-hmm.
You can tell I get animated
yes.
and excited about this.
And you'll find that whenever music comes up on our channel, I'm going to go crazy over it because I am a music nerd. I'm a self-professed music nerd. When I go to the movies, about half the time, I notice the soundtrack just as much as I notice what's actually on the screen.
I mean, you played violin for how many years?
8 to 10-ish.
Yeah, so I mean, like, almost a decade of your life you spent on concentrating on music?
Yes. Yes. And it's fantastic. Yeah. I will always love music, and Final Fantasy music is some of my favorite from any media.
Mm-hmm.
And as I like to say, good music can make or break a movie.
Absolutely.
It can make or break a show, and it can make or break a game. And when you have the good, well-written, well-performed music, it can make something that's, it's like, it's okay, it's not really good. Yeah. It can turn that into a great experience.
It can make it absolutely so many more leagues enjoyable.
And you can have something that's great, and if the music is terrible, or the sound is terrible,
it drags it down.
Music is so much more important than a lot of people realize, because the thing about good music,
you don't always consciously notice it.
You don't always notice it.
Yeah.
I notice it because I trained myself to notice it, because I had to. That was part of what I did. But good music makes the world go round, as far as I am concerned.
And she's just had a smile plastered all over her face since we left the concert hall, and that was...
Actually, no, it was since before we left.
3 hours ago?
It's just so good. I can't help it.
Oh, yeah.
It was just... This was my birthday present.
Yes.
This was my birthday present from my parents.
Yep.
And it was such
cool of them
a
to
great
come with us,
one.
because they haven't played any of these.
They don't know any about these.
They're completely unaware of any of it. They were just like, well, we can appreciate the art and the music and everything, and they came away just like, that was cool. It seemed interesting.
Yeah,
so they were just happy that we were happy.
Yeah,
so,
and I know my parents really liked certain of the themes.
Yeah.
My dad could not get over the little dancing chickens. Like, he was just like, what is that? I'm like, they're chocobo. They're adorable. They're riding birds. They are amazing.
Mm-hmm. So, so anyway, that pretty much covers everything about the performance. I just felt like, since it is covering something that is relevant to gaming, and it is, an artful experience, and any of the critique either of us, well, maybe not her, because she has expertise in this, any critique I've made, at least, keep in mind, amateur critique here.
As far as I'm concerned, the orchestra did a phenomenal job. The chorus also did a phenomenal job.
Yes.
In general, they did great. I mean, as an orchestra nerd, I noticed a little bit of rushing here and there, a few offbeats, but they got right back on it, and that's human error. That's going to happen no matter how good you are. You're always going to mess up at some point.
Yeah.
That's just the way it works. Even professionals.
Yeah, that just comes with performing live.
But it was so minuscule that I only noticed it in the back of my mind and was immediately distracted by the amazingness again.
And I, the untrained amateur, never noticed any of these things. So
like,
it only took someone with a decade experience in classical orchestra training to see those mistakes. So
someone who actually at one point had a dream of joining the Houston Symphony.
Yeah.
That was legitimately one of my dreams when I was in high school. And then I was like, it's so hard to get a spot.
It's such a commitment, too.
It's a commitment. It's a fairly cutthroat thing, because you just have to be really, really, really good. And I was, like, looking at the rest of the people in my orchestra, and I'm like, I feel like they have a better shot at this than I do.
That's how it was about art.
So, like, even though I'm not going to say I was bad, because I wasn't. I was part of the best high school orchestra in Texas, so... And by the way, Texas is big, with a lot of high schools.
It's larger than a lot of European countries.
And a lot of orchestras. But, you know, it was one of those things where I'm like, I had to really think about it, and I decided it wasn't worth trying for and probably failing. But because of that, I've always been really into, you know, going to the symphony. And and I haven't gotten to go for several years. This just reinvigorated my love and enjoyment of live symphony performances. Like, this was just... It was the icing on the cake for my birthday. It really, really was. It was phenomenal. Everybody did a fantastic job.
So, on that note, I think that concludes our impressions.
That concludes our coverage.
Of the Distant Worlds music from Final Fantasy live performance.
We are not on the ground at Jones Hall, I'm afraid.
No, we came home after a celebratory dinner as well.
Yes, we did.
Anyway, I'm Ken Spark here at Last Full Press. Hope you guys have enjoyed our commentary.
I'm Violeta.
And as always, we wish you all good gaming
and Godspeed. And great music, too.
Indeed. Cheers, everyone.
Bye!